Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 25-26 cohort training. It's hard to believe that we are already talking about 25-26. This is being recorded, so if you need a link to that recording, just reach out to Julie, and we will also be sending out the slide deck with an email that we're sending out in June. This is our team. My name is Carly Thibodeau, and I have been with this team for almost 3 years now. And before that, I was a teacher for 21 years. And with me today is Ashley.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ashley Satry, and I joined this team about 2 years ago. And before that, I was also a special education teacher, both here in Maine and in Virginia for 14 years.
And Julie's with us.
Good morning, I'm Julie Pelletier. I am the admin support for the monitoring team. This is my 8th year with the DOE and the monitoring team. And before that, I was admin support at a K-5 elementary school for 16 years.
Awesome, thank you. And Colette Sullivan is our federal programs coordinator. And then Jennifer Gleason is another member of our team. This is our contact information. You can email us anytime as questions come up, or if you just need some feedback or anything like that, we're always available. So welcome, you are part of the 25-26 cohort for review for monitoring and audit. And this is around the general supervision system that's outlined in MUSER, and we, a part of IDEA, we report to the Office of Special Ed Programs. And then we also have, yes, it's outlined in MUSER as that says there. Okay. So we do have an agenda. We're going to go through the process for the audit. We'll talk about the self-assessment. We'll go over due dates and the parent staff surveys, and then we'll just talk about what comes next. So please feel free to interrupt or drop questions in the chat. We do have some chat box check-in spots where we'll be stopping to, see if anyone has questions. But if anything comes up, please feel free to interrupt me, or if I am going too fast, or if you need something repeated, it's definitely okay to let me know. Okay, so we will be sending out an email in mid-June to each director, and it will contain the following. So you'll get a copy of this PowerPoint, you'll get our monitoring timeline and checklist, you'll get a link to the self-assessment, you'll get a link to our IEP quick reference document, as well as a link to resources, which houses that quick reference document, but also quick reference documents for other things like forms and the written notice. And then we also hopefully we'll have our professional development schedule ready, and in that email. If not, it will come out shortly after that. I am not sure if we've 100% finalized that. And then we'll also send a copy of the results-based accountability rubric that we use when we're going through this process. So you'll get to see what that looks like. So we're going to jump right in. This is that monitoring timeline and checklist that I referenced before. So this just goes through all of the things that will happen throughout the 25-26 cohort year. So here, these are the things that we're kind of doing right now. You probably got your letter of notification, so you're here at this cohort training to find out what that entails. And then we'll also be doing a preparing for file review training on June 5th. So that's also something that you could attend or send staff to attend. That goes through what we look at specifically when we review files. And then more of our timeline, this is around the visit dates and what we are asking for. So we have the cohort split up into two sets of visits. The first set we will be visiting in November and December. And we ask that you complete the self-assessment by October 1st for those people that will be visiting in November and December. And we will send results of that self-assessment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then for the visits that will be coming out in April and May, we ask that you complete the self-assessment by March 1st so that we have some time to look at the self-assessment and get it sent back to you so you have a copy of that and things like that. And so this just goes through what we ask you to include when you do the self-assessment, like how many files to do, and then the out of unit placements or out of district, like those students that attend SPPSs or however you refer to those. So we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that also. Then the next part is all during on-site. Okay, so we've taken away what we used to call the desk audit, where we'd ask you to prepare things and send them in to us ahead of time before your on-site visit. We're no longer doing that. And so we ask for these things to be prepared for the on-site visit. So we have those policies and procedures. Then we'll be reviewing those IEPs, and it will be those same IEPs that you reviewed as part of your self-assessment. We're just coming in to verify what you saw when you looked at those same files. And so that's what our review will be based on. And then we're also asking for the written notice from that annual meeting because there's a piece we need to look at for that. And then we also need to ask for schedules. So we will be attaching a form that we've kind of put together to help so we can see that the students are receiving the services that are on their IEP. So you can either use the form that we provide, or if you have a easier, better, more useful way for you to provide schedules, just showing that those students are receiving those services, then you can use that. We're not set in any way. And if you have a suggestion, we're open to suggestions because this is a new thing that we're looking for. It's a new finding that we've included. It started with our 24-25. And so we've been asking for ideas about how to make this process easier for getting these schedules to just verify that they're receiving those services on their IEP. Other things that we will review when we come for that on-site visit are we'll look at those out-of-unit files. And so we'll go into detail about that. We'll also look at those transition plans. That's something that we need to report. It's a federal indicator, it's called, and we have to report that to the Office of Special Ed Programs. We'll also look at any abbreviated day files of students that are currently on abbreviated day. We'll ask to see the ISPs for students that are parentally placed in private schools. And then we'll ask to see eligibility forms, and we'll talk more about specifics of that. We'll also need to see child find for your initial referrals for either the 25-26 school year or the 24-25 school year. Those are the best school years to use. And again, we'll go into more detail about this. This is just kind of snapshots. I know it's really small, so we have more information on the additional slides. And then we will also, if you are an SAU or if you're CDS, either or, but if you're an SAU that is doing the pre-K, like you're part of the cohort 1 or 2, where you've taken on the responsibility for those pre-K students, then we will be looking for transition from Part C to Part B, and that goes for CDS as well. So that's just something to keep in mind. So those are all the things that we'll look at during the on-site visit. And then we also have some things that happen after. One is pre-findings, and we talk about this in detail once we're finished with our visit. We always go over next steps, but this just kind of outlines for you what those pre-findings will be like. So they're due within 30 days from when we send them out to you. And then the corrective action plan, or the CAP, as we refer to them. Those will be issued for those people that we visit in November and December. Your cap will be issued on January 31st of 2026. And then it's a 10-month window to close that cap. And so your due date is November 30th of 2026. And then for those visited in April and May, your cap is issued on June 30th. And you also have a 10-month window, excuse me. And so those caps will be due April 30th of 2027.
Carly, before you move on to the self-assessment, I was just going to add that from our exit interviews for this year's cohort, we got a lot of feedback that this monitoring timeline checklist that we send out was one of the most helpful pieces of the process. So we'll send that out to you guys. People were referring to them as the green sheet, which I thought was fun. So just hang on to that. That's probably going to be one of your best tools based on the feedback we've heard from this cohort. So,
right. That's a good point. And so we send this out, and this has all of the pieces of the monitoring timeline from like start to finish, with the caps being issued. But then we typically send out an email when you've completed your self-assessment, and we include that list of just the green where it's those things that will be reviewed at your on-site. And if for any reason we've forgotten something on this, or if something changes, which hopefully it doesn't, then we update it to make sure you have the most up-to-date information when we send it out closer to visit time. All right, and then this is a list of everyone that is in cohort for 25-26 to be very transparent, so you can see your SAU listed and the date of your visit so that everyone knows when we're planning on coming. So it shouldn't be a surprise. We don't want to surprise anybody. We really want this to be as valuable as possible and collaborative. So please reach out if there is any issue or any issues. Okay. So this whole audit review piece is an OSEP requirement, and that OSEP is that Office of Special Ed Programming. And specifically, there was we refer to it as 2301. That memo 2301 came out 2 years ago, I think. And so we've made some adjustments to how we do our monitoring and the audit process. And so a lot of it is based off of that 2301. And then also it comes from IDEA when it was rewritten in 2017. And then, of course, MUSER has regulations in there also about supervision and monitoring. So that's why we do this. So again, just kind of a reminder about dates. So if your visit is scheduled for November or December, please try to get your self-assessment done by October 1st. And if you're scheduled for April or May, please try to get your self-assessment done by March 1st. And then everything else will be reviewed when we come on site, and we'll make sure to get that green sheet to you. So when you're thinking about your self-assessment, you want to include IEPs that range across disability categories. Okay, so when you're picking files, don't pick all the speech and language identified students or all OHI or something like that. Please spread them across disability categories as much as you can. We know that's not always a possibility. So just as much as you can, try to do these things. Again, ages, including transition plans. So if you're an SAU that's K-12, please include those. However, I will say we do not look at graduating students. So if you have a student that's graduating, when we come for the on-site visit, if they're planning on graduating that school year, we won't review that. And that is because there will not be any opportunity for child-specific correction. And so that's why we don't look at graduating students. Also, try to go across case managers, if you have multiple. Same with ethnicities and schools within an SAU. So if you have multiple schools, try to pull them from across those schools. And then that out of unit placement, like those students that are placed at an out of district or SPPS or however you refer to that, one from each placement. So for example, if you send to multiple places, like I'm just using like Sweets or Spurwink, that sort of thing. So you just need one from each of those places to be included. And if you have none, then that's okay. If you just have one, that's okay. So just depending on what it is for you. Same with multilingual learners. If you have a multilingual learner that has an IEP, you can include that. Oh yeah, and there's that note about no graduating seniors. Oh, look, I got to that. Okay, and then if you're in cohort for taking over for the preschoolers, that FAPE responsibility, please include those students as well. So if you are one of those, you can include those as one of your 20 in the self-assessment or however many you're doing. Because 15, we're doing 15. Okay. So so we're doing, this is the number of files that you want to complete for your self-assessment. And we've tried to adjust this because it's a little bit tricky, but so this refers to if you're an SAU, RSU, or MSAD, these are the numbers of files that you will be reviewing or that we ask you to review for your self-assessment. Okay. And then once we come on site, we're going to share a list of other files to be reviewed during the visit. So we'll ask for, some that you didn't pick for that self-assessment. So we're just going to ask for a few others. So I think that this is pretty self-explanatory, but the child count. So if you have a child count of 30 or over, then you would review 15 files. If you have less than 30, you would review 10. And if you have less than 10 special education students, you would review all those files as part of your self-assessment. And if you have questions about this, you can always reach out to us because there are always some different circumstances. And so we're willing to work with you, when those come up. So always feel free to reach out. Okay, so we're trying to take into account the AOS folks and the unions that are out there because these get really confusing because some unions or AOSs have like 6 towns, SAUs, I don't even know what you call them, within one. And so then if we ask you to do 15 for every one of those, that's a lot. It's a lot of self-assessments and files to review. So we have tried to adjust this so it makes sense. So we're asking that you please choose no more than 20 files across all of those SAUs within your AOS or union. And again, be mindful of trying to include that variety of case managers, the grades, the disability categories, and so on. And then once we come on site, we will share a list of other files that we'd like to review during that visit. But stick with that 20 across, and then we'll talk about those other ones when we come on site. Okay, so this self-assessment, you want to review one student from each out of unit placement. So I kind of have talked about this a little bit a couple of times. And that's that if you send them to an out of district or SPPS or whatever. So while on site, we'll review those advanced written notices and written notices that document the process of them being placed in that out of unit. But it's only for students, that have been placed within the past 2 years. Okay, so if the student has been there longer than that, then we will not look at that at this piece. We will not look at the placement piece. We'll just look at the file, the IEP. And if the student came to you, let's say they transferred into your SAU and you were not the one to place them in the last 2 years, then we would not review that either. Because again, it's looking at your process. And so if you didn't do the process, then we would not review that. Okay. So I think you all may be the last cohort that like we've updated. So in the past, we used to send out this spreadsheet to everybody for this self-assessment piece, and you had to fill in pluses and minuses, and it was kind of difficult to use. We understand that. So now we have a form that we send out instead. So we've gotten good feedback about this, that it's much more user-friendly. And we do have a practice, model self-assessment form that Ashley dropped into chat that you can practice. It doesn't, if you fill that out, the results don't stay anywhere. They just go, like we go in and delete them, like no one has access to them. So you can kind of play with it and try it out, see how it works. If you want to do that before you do your own self-assessment form. So this self-assessment, this is what it looks like. So everyone will get their own, like when we send out the emails, you'll get your own link to your SAU or RSU, MSAD, AOS, union, however that works. And so you can share that link with case managers if you are asking, or other staff, if you're asking case managers or other staff to complete that file review for the self-assessment, you can share that link and they'll all go into that same document, all those results. So you can see here, you're just filling out the student information. And then it goes on, you give the annual IEP meeting, put that date in, and then if they attend like an SPPS or a regional or even a 60/40 school, which, you can enter that information in there. And then the case manager, disability, and then we get into the findings of what you're reviewing on your IEP. So it's just answering a yes, no. So we pose the piece of the IEP. So this is from section 4A, the results of initial or most recent evaluations of the child. And so you would click yes if that information equals the yes, which the date, the name of the evaluation and results are current, and so on. And then you put no. If you click no, then you're going to get this prompt that says, why is this non-compliant? Because if you say no, then you're saying it's non-compliant. And so you would just put the reason why you said it was a no. And then it'll give you that way you'll have a note about why you said that was no. If you say it's yes, then you'll just go on to the next question without a prompt asking you why, because you're saying it is compliant, so it just moves on. And then this is just the next finding that comes up. AFS1 is about section 4B, the strengths of the student. And so you would just click yes or no, whether it meets that criteria that's listed there. So, and you would just complete the form. It just keeps going like that as you answer. And in our preparing for file review training that we're doing on June 5th, we will go over this in more detail. We'll pull it up so you can see as we click through the self-assessment how that works. But like I said, we have that link to that practice one, so you can kind of play with it in between if you have time or if you want to.
Carly, there's a good question in the chat that I was going to answer, but I'll leave it to you. Just about how early can you fill out the self-assessment if you're in May?
You can fill it out as early as you want to. We just ask for the deadline of that March for those May visits, because we just want to have available that self-assessment so you can get the feedback, and then because we input that information into our tool that we take on site. We call it our EMT. And so we put that information in there, but you can do it as early as you'd like. The self-assessment is really meant to be a tool for you all to be able to review your IEPs. And if you notice things that are non-compliant and you have an IEP meeting coming up before the visit, then you can fix those before we get there. And then when we are on site, we look at the most recent IEP. So if you've made those changes already, then we would change the no to a yes. So it's really, yeah, it really just benefits you when you complete that self-assessment and do it early, and you can, make some changes if
Carly, I have
you,
a question. This is Lena Vitagliano from Eva.
yep,
We're, as a team, are meeting this Thursday, Friday
yep,
to do exactly that, right? End of year blue file review, match it up to EDMS, all that good stuff. So this would be a perfect time, and we've already dived into the practice one, but obviously the practice one is of not a whole lot of use because you don't get the results in the
right,
spreadsheet. So,
yes.
but we did practice with it. In my letter, I didn't get a link, so if I could get a link for us, that'd be great. Or if that's not, was it supposed to be sent with the initial letters, the link?
The link did not go out with the letters.
Okay,
We're going
okay.
to send it in our email, and we're sending those, I believe we agreed that we're sending them on June 2nd because
Oh,
we are really trying to get them out to people. But Lena, if you need yours Thursday, Friday, we can get that to you
that'd be great.
sooner if you
And
need
so
it
that's
Thursday,
question
Friday.
number one. Question number two is, and I want to be clear on this because our last audit, we weren't clear. So we had, reviewed a bunch of files, and when the on-site folks came, they used a different year than we had reviewed. Luckily, we do this process every year, so it ended up okay. But we were kind of like, so I want to be sure when let's say we're in May,
Yep.
the files you'll be reviewing are for the school year that you're currently in or the year prior?
No, we look at the most recent IEP or files.
Most
Yeah.
recent IEP.
So
Okay.
yes, so if you do the file review on, in I don't know, whenever you choose to do it, like if you're going to
Right.
do it like Thursday and Friday. So
Well,
if
we're
you're
gonna do
doing
for
those,
this year, for this
yeah,
academic year, obviously we'd want to do it again prior to you coming, right?
okay, right.
So maybe we
So
won't use your link because that wouldn't make a whole
okay,
lot of sense, but so we're gonna do it this year just to make sure our files are good, right? And
yep,
we've
yep,
followed the process. And then next year, when the school year starts, that's
yep,
the files that you're gonna be reviewing. So if we've had an updated IEP from a student in September,
yes,
that's, okay, okay,
yes, yes.
Yeah,
okay.
and hi, this is Melinda Brown, also from MIVA.
Okay.
We did not find a date in our
I
initiation
already got
letter.
an answer to that, Dr. Brown.
Right, okay,
We're
but
all
it's
set.
November, right?
No, it's May.
Okay,
Our files will be due May 15th, 2026, but I'll talk to you about that. I've already chatted about that.
all right, thanks.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, you guys are a special case, right? Because
Yeah.
we're trying to do
Virtual.
the virtual
Love it.
file review. So this
Yes.
is like a test run for us too. So this is great. We appreciate it.
Hey Carly, this
Yes.
is Heather King from Maine Arts Academy.
Hi.
Can you make sure that if you could send me the self-assessment early, that would be great. Our special ed director is leaving at the end of the year, so I just want to make sure I get everything as well. Nikki Pantaloni's also on this call. We're going to be handling things. I just
Okay.
love to get it done early.
Yeah. Like I said, we're going to send out those links on June 2nd. They'll be in our email. So because we have to go in and we have to make it specific to you all, every SAU specifically. And so we will get those and put them in our emails and get those out on June 2nd. So Julie, did you make a note of the names that we need to send stuff
Yes,
to?
I did.
Okay, thank you. I wrote it down too, but I was like, all right, she's going to want this information. So yeah. All right. Perfect. Thanks.
Carly,
Okay.
Diane has a question about printing the self-assessment, and I will say, Diane, we have gotten some feedback that it does not print well. There's an option to print it out, but it doesn't print well because it's a branched form. So we have not quite figured out how we can make that more accessible and more printer friendly. So you can, but it doesn't work well, is the answer to that, unfortunately.
Yes. Yep. Oh, does it say 2025? Sorry, Alan. Yep, it should be 2026. So, yes. I'll fix that on the list. Yep. Okay. Great questions. Thank you all so much. Ashley's going to take over and do some more information.
Yep, we're going to switch over to kind of talk about the on-site visit itself. And so the things that we're going to review on site, here's that list again, just in a different, more readable format, but we'll be looking at those student files, and we're going to go over each of these in more detail too. The required federal indicators, which is B11, that's the child find, B12, which is that transition from Part C to Part B, if that applies to you, and B13, which are those transition plans. We're going to look at summaries of performance. We're going to look at eligibility forms, abbreviated day, if you have any out-of-unit placements, fund authorization letters, policies and procedures, and ISPs for students placed in private schools, if that applies to you. And again, we'll go over these in more detail. Just go back for 1 second, Carly. As far as preparing these files for the actual review day, we have seen this in many different formats. So this is really whatever works best for you. Some people have prepared everything and put it in a binder. Some people have just shared their files with us, just pulled them out and said, go through and find what you need. Some people have printed all of these things out individually and, stapled them together and labeled them and whatever. So however that works for you, we will review it the way that it's best for you. So there's no expectation of how this is presented to us, just as long as we can see all of this stuff. So I just like to give that little tip ahead of time that depending on what works for you, we are happy to review it in that way. So, and then other things about the day of the visit. We usually come as a full team, depending on what schedules allow. It's usually the 4 of us. If it's not going to be, we try to give you a heads up ahead of time. We will reach out to you before your visit, about a week before, just to connect and let you know if anything's changed about who's coming or those kind of things. So when we're there, one of the things that we like to do is be able to sit down with staff to review their files or review files that would be relevant to them. This is not required if staff are not interested in this, or it's just not possible because of scheduling. We absolutely understand that, but we do like to offer that up as a PD type of experience for staff. Some people are very comfortable getting that direct feedback. Some people like to just come in and sit and watch what we're doing. We try to make it as PD feeling as we can. We've gotten a lot of great feedback from staff who have come in and sat with us and reviewed their files, or even just been there to kind of observe the whole process. Any staff who do come will receive contact hours from us. So just a little note about that we're happy to have as many people or as few people as you guys want to have or can have there on the day of the visit. We will also visit programming within your SAU if possible. Now, again, we've gotten some feedback about this, that this is just nearly impossible for staffing wise, and because our schedule is a little tricky to nail down on, how long we'll be there in the day. But we can do that and are willing to view any programming that you guys have if that is something that you're interested in. And we will review next steps after we've done all of those things, and we complete a short exit interview to wrap everything all up. So that's kind of what the day looks like. On that note, because we review every SAU and AOS and every other structure across the state, the days can look very different. It's really hard to predict exactly how long we're going to need to be there. We do schedule to be there for an entire day. Usually, I think we schedule from 9 to 3. And that depends, of course, on how many files we're reviewing, how many staff want to come if they do. So this is always a little bit fluid. We are generally finding that as a full team, if we're reviewing kind of the general amount of files, we're usually gone by midday. We're usually out of there by lunchtime. So along that note, please don't feel as though you need to provide us lunch. We do like to have restrooms nearby or access to water, because for some reason I always forget my water. We're always traveling all over the state and never know exactly where we're going, but I always forget my water. So we always like to know where there's a water fountain or something. But again, as we get closer to your visit, we will reach out, whoever your contact person is, and we'll kind of check in with you. And then we can know a little bit more detail about either you have staff that are going to want to participate, or if there's anything different about the number of files we're reviewing. So we can give a little bit more specifics about what our day looks like at that point. But again, it's usually very flexible. We are happy to adapt to whatever you guys need to do. And we just try to make it as PD and helpful as we can for you, and try not to bring too much stress when our team comes in. So please reach out if you guys have any questions about any of that stuff. We're happy to connect about small questions, big questions, whatever. Okay, so that's the day up. Now we'll dig into these actual components that we're reviewing. So we are going to look at these federal indicators. You may or may not have heard that term before. I know I was not familiar with it before joining the team. And those are the ones that we have to report to OSEP. So there are a couple of federal indicators that we're going to talk about. The first one being B11, that's the child find. So again, it's a federal indicator. It requires evidence be reported as part of the SPP APR, which is the State Performance Plan Annual Performance Report. And we are always striving for 100% compliance on these federal indicators. So what does that look like? So B11, which you'll hear us throw that term around. So always, if we're just using acronyms and numbers that you don't know what we're talking about, please just say what. So B11, that's initial referrals. So what we ask for is 10 initial referrals. And again, depending on your number of students in your SAU or what's happening, we're flexible on that number if you don't have 10, but we strive for 10. As part of these initial referrals, what we're going to be looking for is that the evaluations to be completed as part of that initial referral are documented on the signed consent form, that the date is noted on the cover page of the evaluation when each was received in the SAU. So your little date stamp of when it was received back. We don't need to see the full evaluation, just that first dated cover page. And then the date that the parental consent was received back is filled in on the consent. So we'll be looking for that for 10 initial referrals. And then we'll be looking to see that the eligibility was completed, or the eligibility meeting was completed within 45 school days of that parental consent being received by the SAU. So that's why we need to see that parental consent with the date filled in. When you're considering your school days, remember that the number of days that are considered school days are when all students were in session.
I'm also just going to jump in here real quick because I didn't adjust the slide to CDS. So CDS would also be required if you are having a visit, and if somebody's here from CDS, I apologize, but obviously it wouldn't be the 45 school days, it would be the 60 calendar days. So it's the same thing, just we do understand that there are different timelines there.
Okay, and then as part of that B11 indicator, we're also looking for the procedural safeguards to make sure that there's documentation that the procedural safeguards were offered to the parent at the point of first contact. So what we can look for here is the advance written notice or the written notice from the initial referral meeting that has the enclosure of procedural safeguards, or it could be an enclosure on the parental consent. So just a note here, and Carly, you might have to jump in to make sure it's clarified, just that the parental consent going home with the written notice from the eligibility meeting is too late.
Right, that the eligibility meeting is too late for proof of procedural safeguards. It needs to be from that initial. So if you don't hold the initial meetings, then there still should be a written notice outlining what was considered for evaluations and going home with the consent. So either one of those, the consent or the written notice, or if you do hold a meeting and you have an advanced written notice of that initial, some people call them a step one meeting. That is where it should be documented. That's your point of first contact.
Thanks, Carly. Okay, and then that child find requirement, so that the children were evaluated for SAUs within the 45 school days. There's that CDS note that it's the 60 calendar days. And you can provide the evidence of any acceptable reasons for delay, which we'll go over on the next slide. And also a copy of your 24, 25, and 25-26 school calendars that has any snow days marked off, because we'll need to verify that timeline. So we'll need your calendars, and you can just mark off any snow days or any other reasons that school was closed. Here's that acceptable, unacceptable list. So if the evaluations are not completed within the timeline, you'll need to document the reason for the completion beyond the timeline. So this is really small. I was going to try to read some of these to you, but I won't be able to, but you will get a copy of that.
Yeah, we include that in the monitoring timeline. So when we send out the monitoring timeline checklist, this is a page like at the end, and then you have all the visit dates. So it's in there, so you will be able to read it once you get it as a PDF in the email.
Yep. And then just document the number of days outside of that timeline that it takes to get those completed. And we will verify that too. So sometimes that's marked, sometimes not marked, but we'll check that and we'll make sure we know how many days that is using your calendar. Okay, so that's B11. B12, this is that federal indicator around early childhood transition. So this is another one of those federal indicators that has to be reported. Target goal is 100% compliance. And what we're looking for here is just the percentage of children that are found Part B eligible with IEPs that are implemented by their third birthday. So that's all we're looking for there. There are some questions to consider. Was the child found not eligible before their third birthday? Was a delay in the transition because the parent did not provide consent for evaluations and or services, or is it one of those acceptable reasons per IDEA, which we have another list for this one for acceptable, non-acceptable? And or was the child found eligible for Part C services less than 90 days before their third birthday? And again, this is just going to be for those for either CDS or for those schools that have taken on that responsibility of fate for the pre-K kids. Carly, did you have anything to add for that slide? Just
No, I'm sorry.
No,
I have to
that's
laugh at that because those questions at the bottom are what throw me every time. So
me too.
really, it's just like, is the IEP implemented before their third birthday? Like that's kind of what that's my goal, to try to answer that question. The other ones throw me for a loop every time.
Yes, this is a new one for our team to review as well. So we are still learning the nuances to that. So you will hear us asking each other these questions all the time. So, all right. And then you'll get this list of those acceptable and unacceptable reasons, because I cannot read those. There's just no way. Okay, so that's B12. B13, this is that post-secondary transition planning. And again, this is one of those federal indicators. And the target goal for this is also 100% compliance, which is tricky because we have to look at a lot of things for this. And so 100% compliance is quite a high standard for that. But sorry, Carly, were you jumping in there? Oh, okay.
Sorry, I forgot I wasn't muted. I apologize.
It's okay. Okay, so this is also a little difficult because we have a very small subset that we can look for these transition plans, because we need to review per IDEA students who are 16 and older, but we also cannot review seniors because if there is required correction, they're not going to be there to be corrected. So there's a sweet spot of 16 and 17-year-olds that are 10th, 11th graders, or you could submit a student who's going to do that extended eligibility, so they're not graduating, but just again, no graduating seniors, and they have to be 16 and up. And we will review these on site. Previously, you guys may remember we did these beforehand. We were having you guys send them to us, but we're just going to review these on site. Not everybody has 10 of these. We ask for 10, but we are flexible with that number because of that small little subset. So please feel free to just check in with your team member and say, I gave you as many as I had, and we'll work with you within that number of 10. So for that, we need to see the advanced written notice, the written notice, and the full IEP for the student. And one more time for the 16-year-old not graduating student.
Some of these can be duplicates, right? So if you're reviewing full IEPs, the same student can meet multiple
Yes,
categories.
that's exactly right. Yep.
Okay.
So here are all the things that we look for on the transition plan. I will go over these quickly because this is one slide I can read this size, but if you guys have more specifics, we do have a B13 training and we can answer any specifics, but we will be reviewing on the advanced written notice that the purpose of the meeting was checked off as a post-secondary transition meeting and that the child was invited to the meeting. So we look that they're either on the invite list or the salutation is written to the student. We've gotten feedback from some vendors that they don't allow you to do that, but as long as the student's on the invitee list on the back, that's fine. This is only if there is a service in the transition plan or in 9G that an outside agency is being invited, then we need to see that the agency was invited prior to the advance written notice going out by the SAU. So that is a mouthful, but we'll need to see that.
Can you say that again and explain it differently?
Yes, I can, because I'm going to ask Carly to do it.
So for this one, what we do is if we look at 9G and we see that there's an outside agency listed in 9G, then we would look for the parental consent being signed, or consent was given by the parents so that that outside agency could be invited to the meeting. So
any outside agency or an outside agency that's specific to transition. So if a student has a community caseworker that has already had the parent consent to be involved the whole year, we don't need the consent for that. Okay.
No, it's just for transition, right?
So voc rehab.
Yeah, typically like those.
Services.
That's the example we give every time is voc rehab, because like I'm not super familiar with all the other outside agencies, but yes. So really, only if something is listed in 9G as part of the transition plan would we look for that parental consent.
Yep. And most often, like Carly said, it's usually voc rehab or there isn't an outside agency. So
right.
That's one of the things we look for, though. So also we look for the written notice to make sure that there was a statement that the post-secondary goals were updated annually. So just a basic statement in the written notice. We are going to look at 9B of the transition plan for those age-appropriate transition assessments to have been completed. 9D is all of those post-secondary goals. So we're going to look at those. 9E, that's the course of study. And we just put that little note in there as a reminder that that needs to be a multi-year course of study through the exit of high school or the anticipated exit. In 9F, we were going to look at those transition services. And then we will look at the IEP to make sure that there are goals that are supporting those post-secondary transition goals. So again, this is just a very brief overview of the things that we look at, but these are all the 9 components that we have to look at to get to that 100% compliance. And we do have a more in-depth B13 training that goes over those if you have questions. Yeah, Lena, please do.
So I heard that, so in the past, as long as in your goals, you wrote in preparation for post-secondary, right? Is it accurate that you're now looking more specifically that the goal matches the post-secondary?
Yes. So if I'm understanding your question correctly, we are not looking specifically anymore for that statement. We're looking to make sure that there's alignment from the goal. So it
So
really
for instance, if a student says that in their post-secondary plan, which we know students change their mind, like, on the reg, but they say they want to be an auto mechanic, you're going to want to look and see that if they have a math gap, you're going to want to see that the math goal relates to the world of auto mechanics and not just a math goal to close a gap.
Well, and I would say that we actually look at it kind of in the other way. If there is a math goal, we can make that connection that a student would need math to be
Okay.
able to do auto mechanics. So you do not have to worry to get that specific and like say, I don't even know because I know nothing about mechanics. But
That's wonderful. No,
yeah,
because it would be very specific, right? And then, but then you go,
exactly.
oh, next time you have a conversation about transition, they're like, nah, I'm thinking I want to be, yeah, okay, thank you.
Yes. In our B13 training, actually, we say for the most part, the goals that students are already working on in their high school curriculum and in their own, social emotional, whatever they're working on is going to align to those post-secondary goals. So hopefully that helps. Okay. All right. So that was B13. So summary of performance forms. We will be looking for 3 of these. And these, you may want to keep this in mind now because when we're auditing next year, we will be looking at the summary of performances that are being written, right now or very soon. So it's for this school year. So you might want to think, oh, these are 3 great examples of summaries of performance I've got going out right now and mark those somehow. So these summarize the child's academic achievements, the completion required under IDEA. They're important to assist children in graduating from high school or higher education, training and or employment. And the big thing that I noticed from this cohort is just we don't want to see a blank for that date sent to student on these. So we want to make sure that they're being given to the student and that that's filled out. So that's for summary of performance. These are those eligibility forms that we'll be looking at. So when we come on site, we'll be looking for 3 specific learning disability forms, 3 adverse effect forms, 1 speech and language form, and then we'll be looking at 3 examples of eligibility forms that were filled out for students who were either dismissed or changed disability category. So for dismissal, we just want to see the form that they're being dismissed with. And for the change of disability category, we would be asking for both forms that are being filled out for that change. So if you have a student who's changing from speech and language to specific learning disability, we would want to see both of those forms. So we are just looking for 3 examples of dismissals or changes, and you can pick however you want to show us that. A couple of notes for those forms. This is our little forms cheat sheet. Again, summary of performance, just make sure everything is filled in. No blank boxes. We do not like a blank box on this team, so just stick an NA in there if you have to, but no blank boxes or areas on the summary of performance. Specific learning disability form, the big thing that we saw this cohort and all cohorts is, especially with Zoom meetings still continuing, we have to see the signatures of all the team members signing the document. So we will need to see the signatures with the 3 SLD forms that you submit. Make sure that there are no blank boxes. Make sure you're including verification, including data, and include those strengths and weaknesses. But the big one that we saw missed most often was just not having those signatures available for us. So speech and language, make sure that there are no blank boxes or areas. There you go. You're going to see that a lot. Document the criteria that documents the adverse impact. Verification must include data. And then one thing we did see this cohort, or at least I did, is just not getting those severity rating scales. They've been filled out, but because our form specifically just said the speech and language eligibility form, sometimes that's all we got, but we will also need to see those severity rating scales. Okay, and then everybody's favorite form, the form for determination of adverse effect. Make sure there are no blank boxes. Document the reason for the use of the form, which that sounds kind of silly, but it's that box right underneath that first checkbox that gets left off often. NA on this form means not available. So verification must include data for everything that you check yes or no. But if you check NA that it's not available, then we wouldn't expect to see any data there. So that's just our little cheat sheet on our forms. I think we may get into more depth with that in our choosing your files for that. So, and again, those can overlap, like Lena said, if you choose a student for the self-assessment and that's a student whose form you want us to look at, that's fine. Those can all, that can be up to you how you choose those. Okay, fund authorization letters. Our guidance here is to have an individual letter for each person who's authorized to commit those funds, and not to send one letter with multiple names on it. Policies and procedures, we're going to look for these policies and procedures when we come on site. We're going to look for referral, child find, and restraint and seclusion. And I will just give you my tip from this year. We saw a lot that were not yet updated, or we saw some that were not yet updated to the age 22 on the child find. So just check your child find policies, make sure they're updated. Okay. Abbreviated day. So if you have any students who are currently on an abbreviated day at the time of our on-site visit, please have those files available because we will review them on site. We need to review every student that is on abbreviated day. And so there is a link here to our abbreviated day training where we go into a lot of detail on abbreviated day because it's very prescribed in user on what needs to be documented and how. So if you have kiddos that are on abbreviated day, you might want to check out that training. Thanks, Carly. Okay, so here are the abbreviated day findings. So again, I'm not going to go through this, but just keep this. If you are somebody who has a student on abbreviated day, be aware that this is what we're looking for. Carly, actually, I'm going to have you jump in if you don't mind on the abbreviated day. I don't know how much detail you want to get into on these forms. So
I think the big thing is to just remember that there are two reasons right now for students to be on an abbreviated day: educational and medical. And there are different criteria that needs to be documented when that happens. So just be mindful that if you have a student on an abbreviated day for an educational reason, these are the things that you need to document. And then, no, must be in the wrong thing. Okay. And then these are the things that you need to document for medical. And the timelines change. Okay. So for educational, student starts an abbreviated day, you have 45 calendar days. Then you need to meet. And then if the student is not off an abbreviated day by that time, then you meet every 20 school days. Medical is different. It's meeting every 90 calendar days. So just keep those things in mind. Timelines change and things that need to be documented change based on educational or medical. So
thanks, Carly. You'll notice when we come on site that we all try to have Carly review our abbreviated day files because they're quite hard to review for and follow all the policies for. So that's why I tagged in our pro Carly on abbreviated day. Okay, teacher certification. This is one of my pet peeves of this process. So I will just do a quick little thing. We will send out an email to you about certification. And so we pull a report that compares NEO to the certification website, and those two things do not talk to each other seamlessly. So when we send out this email, you may find that there are staff on there that do not work in your district anymore. They may have transitioned. So please feel free to just respond to that and let us know that. it's hard to make sure that this report is the most up-to-date information. So we will send it out to you. And if there's anything on there that just is not appropriate, please just let your team member know. And if there are actual certification errors, we'll explain that in the email, how those need to be clarified during the process. But again, it is often frustrating for directors when they get a list of 20 certification errors and 10 of them don't work there anymore. So please, we are working with our teams to try to get that report to be more concise. But when you get the report, please just let us know if there's anything inaccurate on there. Parent surveys, our wonderful Julie will email a link and a QR code via email for the parent surveys. It's open for the entire school year, and you will get the results in August for the parent surveys if the N size is met. So you will get your district specific results. So not sure if it changes, but this past year it was 5. So if you have at least 5 parent surveys, you will get your actual results. And if you have less than that, you'll just get the overview. And staff surveys, same thing. Julie will send out a link and a QR code to the directors. The link is included in the confirmation email sent to directors approximately a month before on-site visit. So I didn't actually know about that timeline when those came out. So Julie's just so seamless. We don't even see it. It takes about 10 minutes for staff to complete. And the same thing, you'll get the results of those in August. And if the N size is met, you will get your specific results. And I believe it was 5 for the staff survey as well. So, all right, that is it for that section. Are there any questions about that? Lena, I do see you have a question about the referral forms. Did you mean that for the referral policy? Is that what you were questioning?
We, as you know, well, you may not know, we use EDMS. And so in EDMS is a referral form. How much information do you look for on the referral?
We do not. We do not look at referral forms.
Okay. Because we don't put a whole lot of detail in there just because we do on the back end. So we don't put it into EDMS. We just, through our RTI process. So thank you.
Yep.
Answer the question. Easy peasy.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Laurie. Yes, Ellsworth. If it's April or May, then yes, it's supposed to be 2026, not 2025. I get going and putting in my dates and I must mess them up. Usually my team members are good about correcting me. So we didn't catch those ones. So sorry about that. All right. So next steps after the on-site visit. So I kind of talked about this when I was talking about the checklist. We have the pre-findings. If you have pre-findings, because not everything can be a pre-finding, those would be due within 30 days. We always follow up with an email. So I've had SAUs where there were no pre-findings, but I always follow up and just say, you have no pre-findings. Like that means it was either 100% or it couldn't be a pre-finding, certain circumstances. But if you have them, we'll send them to you. You have 30 days to correct them. And also abbreviated day. Abbreviated day is not optional. Pre-findings are optional, but abbreviated day must be corrected within the 30 days if there were any things that were missing in your documentation of students on abbreviated day. So, and then we also send out that results-based accountability rubric so that you can just see what that looks like. You don't get your placement on the rubric until we issue the cap. However, we just send it out to be transparent and let you know these are the things that we're taking into consideration. This is really small print. I apologize, but you'll get a copy of this in your email also, so you'll be able to see it. But we definitely take into account all the things that we review on site. But there are things outside of that that we also take into account, such as participation in alternate assessment, dispute resolution, CAPS, if there are any out there, and then McKinney-Vento. So we're collaborating with other teams and just taking that into account also. All right, then we get to the corrective action plan. And like I said, we've talked about this a little bit. So if you are visited in November and December, you'll get your corrective action plan on January 31st, 2026, along with your placement on the rubric. And then your corrective activity is due November 30th of 2026. So you've got that window to make those corrections so that you can correct them as they come up in annuals, at annuals. Then the April, May visits, you'll be issued your cap on June 30th, 2026, and you'll also get your placement on the rubric at that time. And your corrective activity will be due April 30th of 2027, which seems impossible. All right. We are discussing the importance of closing your cap on time. This is a little screenshot from 2301, that guidance that came out from OSEP around monitoring. And so we need to make sure that non-compliance has been corrected within a 1-year timeline. And so we are doing a 10-month timeline, and that is our due date because we don't want to have any late caps. And we want to make sure that we have enough time to review evidence and make sure that it's closed on time. And this is one of those things that we now must report to OSEP also, is that it was corrected within the mandated timeline, and our state timeline is 10 months. So this is from Muser, and this just outlines actions that are available if the corrective action plan is not closed within the timeline. Then it's also important because this is one of the considerations when we are looking for placement on that rubric, the results-based accountability system rubric that we're using. So if you're one of those SAUs, because every time we go in, we talk about tier 1 and everyone's like, yes, I want to be on tier 1. And so this is one of those things that we consider. And so if your previous cap was closed on time, then that's definitely a possibility. But if it's not closed on time, that is one of the things that we think about. Now, we know there are a lot of other factors, and we take that into account because some, like a special ed director, may be a new director, and they're like, well, I didn't have anything to do with the last cap. And we understand that. So we're not saying this is definite. This is just something that we consider. So, but if it's really something that you want, to achieve, then definitely closing your cap on time is important. And it's just some tips. So we ask that you submit evidence before the due date, because then that gives us time to review the evidence and we can send feedback. And if there are further corrections that need to be made, it gives you time to send corrections back or other corrections that need to be sent. Okay, so it's really important to get it closed by the due date. Now, especially since now we're reporting that to OSEP, that's going to be a requirement. So it's become a thing for us to strive to achieve. No late caps. That's like our mantra. Right. And we know it's not easy. And so just reach out to us. We really see this as like a team approach between our team and all of the SAUs and directors and everybody that we work with. Another tip for closing your cap on time. So we send out this child-specific correction document, and it outlines very specifically who the students are, what their findings are that need to be corrected. It has their annual date of their meeting. And so we sort this list by annual date. So if you start at the top, it should be the student that's coming up for review. And so you have that list of those corrections that need to be made. And so you should be able to easily see those, make those corrections at the annual, and then submit the IEP to us. It's completely up to you how you want to do it. If that's easiest for you, submit it as soon as it's ready. We don't mind stuff being trickled in, because we review it, we make notes on your CAP worksheet, we send the updated CAP worksheet back to you and say, yep, great, this is closed, and we send just information back and feedback. So we'll do that every time you send evidence, so that you can kind of see how it's closing and, you know, feel good about that because it feels good when pieces start getting checked off, right? But if you're a person that likes to collect all your stuff and send it as one, you can do that also. But like we said before, just please give us enough time before the due date so we can review that. And we do start sending out reminders that your cap is due. What I think we try to start 4 months before that due date. And so if you get sick and tired of hearing from us and you're like, yes, I know I'm working on my cap, like just you can send us an email and be like, leave me alone, and we'll be okay with that. uh, all right. And then yeah, just you can always reach out to us with any questions. We have like we break it up so that we have a specific SAU that like we're in charge of. But you can reach out to any one of us. We communicate on the daily, so it's all good. When you're submitting documents, you can go through USPS or snail mail and send it to our office location. Oh, and please label them and do not use staples. That would be super helpful if you are sending things in through the mail to the office. That would be awesome. Thank you so much for that ahead of time. Or you can send it to our email at monitoring.doe@maine.gov. That is where we get most of our submissions. And that's a secure email box. Us on the team are the only ones that have access to it. So no one's going to see any IEPs that people shouldn't be seeing. All right, coming up next, we have that preparing for the self-assessment and file review. So that's that June 5th date that I have thrown out a few times. That's where we're going to go through the IEPs in detail of those findings that we're looking at. We have 2 times on that day. One's at 9 a.m. and one is at 3 p.m. So please register for those and join us so you can get information. It will be recorded. So if you're like, oh my gosh, that isn't going to work for me, we record it. And Julie is the one to contact for that recording. She keeps track of everything. Okay, moving on. Oh, we also have, we've started setting our PD for the 25-26 school year already. Like I said, we're trying to put together that schedule to get it out in our email. If it's not ready, we'll send it out very soon. So dates to keep in mind, that post-secondary transition training we'll be doing on October 30th. And then we have our IEP training on October 14th. So keep those dates in mind if you want to attend either one of those. But we've done these in the past. And so the recordings are still relevant and they are on our website at this link. So you could also access those. All right, now we're getting into the end here. So if you have any last minute questions, be thinking about them or, you know, stick them in the chat box, but we just have some resources we like to share with you and then we'll get you back onto your day. So we've got the procedural manual, always the great resource, good information in there about all special ed forms. Maine Unified Special Ed Regulations, or MUSER, was updated in July of 2024. Also good information, not as user-friendly. We have our IEP quick reference document that we always share. This goes over the compliance. This is from the 24-25. We are updating to have the 25-26 ready to go in your email. So you'll get a copy of the most up-to-date one in the email that we're sending out on June 2nd. These are links that you can access. You can go to the top one for our PD calendar. You can go to the second one for our recordings and the PowerPoints. And then those last 3 are just so many other resources. I mean, it's a lot, but there are some good things in there if you have time to check them out. This is our feedback and contact hour form. So you can use the link or the QR code to complete this. We appreciate feedback around our PD. Let us know how we're doing with this. Things you'd like to see. We try to adjust it as much as we can. I mean, there are some things that we just can't fix, right? But we do try. And if you enter your email, I will send you a contact hour for attending today. and you're going to choose the training. I think it says cohort training. Yep, cohort training, and you will get a contact hour certificate if you select that and put your email in. And Ashley dropped the link in the chat for this, so thank you, Ashley. This is where you can find Maine DOE online, social media, all the good stuff. And then this is our contact information one more time, because like I said, we're really here to support you, and we want to work with you to get ready for this whole process. So if you have questions that come up, reach out to us. If you want feedback around things that you're doing, reach out to us. We just ask that if you do any of that, just don't put it on an IEP form or any kind of specific form. Just send us hypothetically in an email, and we're happy to answer questions or give feedback. All right. Was there anything else? Any other questions that came up? I saw that something's going on in chat, but
No,
all good?
no questions in the chat yet.
Perfect. Okay. Does anybody have last minute questions before we give you back to your day?
Carly, I'm just going to make a quick note about the parent survey. I usually send that out mid-August, so they can look for it about then, because we like to try to get it out in advance to the start of the school year, so they can include it in any open houses or first year newsletters or anything like that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Okay. Excuse me. Well, thank you all for joining us today. And like I said, just reach out to us if anything comes up, and we will be in touch.
Thanks all.
Bye.